love it when you're talking to the camera and then you realize it's not recording? Hi guys, it's Rebecca. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. Today's video is going to be my history of my panning that palette. So, how did I start this? I said like a really long spiel when I thought I was recording and I can't remember. But anyway, as I was looking at the palette that I'm gonna pan this year, I was going back through memory lane and just thinking about all the palettes that I've panned in the year. So I wanted to share with you guys the palettes that I've panned. This is gonna be the 9th year that I do pan that palette. And for 2024, it's going to be the 9th year. And so I've done a lot of panning and I kind of have an idea of what I can pan and what's easy for me to pan. So I want to share with you guys that thought process. So hopefully I can finish in time before I have to go. So sorry if I'm going really fast. The first one was for year 2016. I started panning since the beginning of the year, but I went ahead and I started just posting on Instagram at the beginning, in mid-year, around June. And so I was panning the Hourglass Ambient Edit palette. This is the first time that the palette that they came out with the palettes, the 6 shadow palettes, and they came with, I think it was like a blush, a bronzer, highlighters, 2 different kind of setting powders. Anyway, I was able to pan that whole thing. I think by August, September, around there. And then I went ahead and I came up with Pan That Palette 2.0, which was another palette from Hourglass, but it was one of those that only has the 3 shades. Back then, it didn't have a blush. That one, I think it had a highlighter, a setting powder, and a bronzer. So I ended up using a total of 9 ambient powders. I don't know if that's what they're called, but yeah, loved it. I haven't purchased a palette from Hourglass since then, just because I was like, it took me all year to use it up and they're so expensive. But then I think they were like 60 bucks, but now they're like 80 bucks if I'm not mistaken, maybe even 90, I don't know. But I know the quality is there, but yeah, since then I haven't purchased one of those. Then the year after that, for 2017, I panned an Urban Decay Deluxe Shadow Box. It was a 9-pan palette. It had a black shadow, so of course I didn't use that one. And then, but the other 8 shades were very colorful, very bright. It was a very colorful, bright palette. So in combination with that, I brought in another palette from Sephora from the Divergent movies. Sephora came out with a collection of makeup to go with the movie release. And so this one had 3 eyeshadows, a blush, and a bronzer. And the eyeshadows were very neutral. You had a brown, a matte brown, you had a champagne-y color, and a matte cream shade. So those 3 colors being very neutral, I figured would go very well with the Deluxe Shadow Box. So that's why I panned them together. So it was a total of 12 shades, 11 shades that I panned so throughout the year. So that's it's kind of like the equivalent of a larger palette, if you know what I mean. For 2018, I kind of went a little different route. For the first palette that I picked was a little mini from Stila. It had, if I remember correctly, it had 6 eyeshadows. It had a cream blush and a highlighter, if I remember correctly. And so that was kind of like my first dive into panning face palettes. Then the second palette that I used up was another Urban Decay palette, but this was a lipstick palette. If you guys remember, there were these silver type palette. It was a container, very reflective, and when you opened it up, it had 12 little containers with lipstick. It came with a lipstick brush, that way you can use it. And I'm a person that reapplies lipstick a lot, so I remember being at work carrying that little box with a little lipstick brush every time whenever I went to the restroom or something, so I could reapply it. It was fun to pan, let me tell you. And so that was the time that I realized I never wanted to own another lipstick palette ever again. I was like, nope, that's it for me. I don't need another lipstick palette. I can just use individual things. And even then after, there were 2 versions. I can't remember which version I had, but Ulta had released a version, and then Sephora had released a version, and some of the shades were similar, but there were also shades that were different. I think the one from Sephora had like maybe, I can't remember. I had the version that had like the most wearable colors. There was one version that had a green shade and like a black shade. It was really out there. But I had the other one. Like, don't get me wrong, I had still had to work through some very deep vampy colors, but the other one with the green shade, I was like, there's no way I'll ever wear a green lipstick. So yeah, after that, I never again ever bought a lipstick palette, and I don't feel like I want to ever again. So learned my lesson there. 2019, that's another year that I started with a face palette and then it turned into a 2.0. The main palette that I used was one from Bare Minerals, and I think it was like the natural or the nudes something. It had 6 shades, and then but it had a bronzer, 2 blushes, and a highlighter. So it had a lot more face products. So it took me quite a bit of time to use that one up, but since I used up the shadows fairly quickly because there was only 6, I went ahead and I introduced another palette from Laura Mercier. It was only a quad, but it did take me quite a bit of time to use that one up. Wasn't very impressed with the quality of the Laura Mercier products, so I really don't have much thoughts on the one from Laura Mercier. Then 2020, that was when I first ventured into panning a huge eyeshadow palette. I went with the Sephora palette from Minnie Mouse. It was a huge chunky container. It looked kind of like a clutch. I think you could use because you could pull the little cardboard out of the little container, and you could use, if you wanted to, the little container as a clutch. But I mean, it said Sephora and it said Minnie Mouse. Like, I would never use that as a purse, you know. But yeah, it came with, I think, 15 shades, very colorful. I had kind of panned it throughout like the previous 2 years using a shade here and a shade there. But I think I ended up with like 13 or 14 shades to finish completely. I did a lot of Franken bronzers with those. I did a lot of Franken blushes in order to use all those eyeshadows up. But that was the one year that I was like, okay, I don't think I can do it like a huge just a huge eyeshadow palette every year because I'm gonna get overwhelmed. So I did finish it all completely except for the black eyeshadow. You guys know my thing with that. Then for 2021, I did another Urban Decay palette. This was the Urban Decay Ammo palette. The eyeshadows on this palette were very small. I think they were 0.7 grams. There were 10 eyeshadows, 1 black, which obviously I didn't pan it, and it was a black glittery one. So I was like, ooh, no, forget it. If I don't like matte black, I definitely don't like glittery black. And then after like in accompaniment to accompany this palette, I panned a face palette from Stila. It came with a blush, highlighter, and bronze, and I think it was the Perfect Peach Glow palette or something like that. It was, what is that formula called? Gillette formula. Wasn't a fan of it. I liked it. While I used it, like, it was fine, but it's not something that I was like, oh man, I gotta get this formula again. It was hard because you couldn't really repress the product, and the product was baked in these like plastic grids within the palette, so it was hard to like get your brush in there, and it was just like, Gillette formula, not for me. I don't think I would ever want that palette. And then eventually that palette got discontinued, so it's not like I could get it again. Not that I wanted to. Then for 2022, I panned the a 6-pan shadow from Sephora. It was a very neutral shade. I kind of feel like I wanted to take a break from the colorful eyeshadows that I had been panning for the last couple of years, and I went just with a very neutral shade of palettes. And then I also panned the Urban Decay Naked Shapeshifter palette, which was a face palette. It was a little skinny thing that you opened. It had a mirror in the middle as a divider between the cream products and the powder products. The powder products were bronzer, highlighter, and like a face powder type setting powder. And the cream side were concealers, highlighters, and bronzers. So I used all of those up. Loved the formula. I wouldn't mind getting it again if that was still available, which I don't think it is. But I really did enjoy that palette. And then because I used up those eyeshadows so fast, I did introduce a 2.0 type pan palette. and that was an e.l.f. 6-pan mini palette, but also it came with a black eyeshadow, so I only ended up panning 5 shades. So those were the 3 palettes that I panned in 2022. And obviously for 2023, you guys know that I panned my Urban Decay, another Urban Decay. It's like I love panning Urban Decay. She-Hulk palette. I ended up working through, I think it was 10 shadows, because 3 of them were broken. And I like the quality. This is the first time that I've panned like a newer palette, because I had just gotten it the year before. And the formula was nice, the pigment was there. It's just I wasn't a fan of the bright green and the blue shade. All the other colors I really enjoyed. So I can't wait to share with you guys the palette that I'm going to be using for 2024. I will say it is a face palette, so it does have a combination between eyeshadows and face products. So I don't know if that helps you guys kind of guess in the comments if you want to, if you feel inclined so to you know, tell me what you think I'm panning. But yeah, so stay tuned. I haven't used it yet, and you guys will know that because you're gonna see it that it's brand new, but I can't wait to get my hands on that. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.